Hello, everybody. My name is Todd Olmeyer, and I really apologize for not being able to be there in person. About 2 weeks ago, I got COVID. Managed to avoid it when I was going through my house as a family, but about 2 weeks after that, somehow got it. So I apologize for not being there in person, and I hope this recording helps answer a few questions. Obviously, I would have loved to have had a nice Q&A session while being there, and so hopefully this sparks some questions, and please feel free to reach out at any time. My contact information's here, and it'll be, I'm sure, the email attached to this, and then also at the end of my presentation here. So on a positive note, I'll be a little bit shorter, so but hopefully this is helpful and beneficial to everybody. If I can get the slides going. There we go. All right, so right now we always talk about how there's lots of opportunities in college golf, and here's just kind of a brief overview. Sometimes these numbers change a little bit here and there as far as the number of teams, but there are several thousand opportunities on the men's and women's side to play college golf. And this is just for D1, D2, D3 NCAA. There's also NAIA schools and junior college and a few other leagues that have college golf. So there are opportunities to play. However, and I don't know if Summer touched on this the other day, but there are also some limitations happening when it comes to that. And you can see here the number of eligible players in each class for junior golf scoreboard, and you can see these numbers are increasing, and the eligible numbers for 23 and 24 are way ahead of pace of where they normally would be at this point. And so what does that mean? Well, a couple things. I mean, it just shows what a boom college golf has become, and obviously you're probably seeing it at the high school level, more participation. And so it just means that these spots are becoming more and more competitive. And so from that standpoint, it's great because you're probably seeing a higher quality of player and just having more exposure to that. But it just means also there's limited or fewer spots out there. And there's also the transfer portal. And going back to this slide, I think part of the reason there's that boom, obviously, is COVID. I mean, it was the only sport, I don't have to tell you this, it was the only sport you could really play. And I think there's some young boys and girls who stopped playing some other sports and started playing golf because of COVID, and it was being an activity they could do. And so with that, there was also all the players in the NCAA were granted an extra year of eligibility. So we're almost through that phase of those players getting that extra year of eligibility, and that's made part of becoming or getting a roster spot more difficult. And also the transfer portal. It's become a little bit easier for players to market themselves and get their name out to other coaches because of the transfer portal. But it's also a little bit of a slippery slope for those. I mean, there's more than 500 men and 312 women in the transfer portal this summer. And 325 of them were D1 on the men's side and more than 200 on the women's side. And so my kind of advice or thought is when you're, if one of your high school players comes back to you and says, hey, I'm thinking of entering the transfer portal, they need to make sure they understand that there's a lot of players out there in that portal. And they also have to understand that there's a chance that if they enter the portal, they might lose their spot with their current team. And are they really prepared to do that? It makes it seem like it's so easy to transfer. But in the end, it's still no guarantee. And this is also playing a bad or having a negative effect on incoming freshmen just because, or high schoolers, because a coach might take a be less willing to take a shot on an unknown commodity if he or she can bring in a transfer who maybe has a little bit of college experience and they kind of know what they're getting. So just, some things to keep in mind if you're advising players. And I hear a lot now, well, I'll just go somewhere and then transfer. And it's just not as easy as one might think. And so I would highly recommend you advising your high school players to make sure they're doing their research on the transfer if they're going to go that route. I'm just going to go over some basics, a lot of stuff you may or may not already know, and just some thoughts to continue to think about. And when they enter high school, they become a prospective student, and so that's when the rules start to kick in as far as recruiting. I think one of the most important things is to meet with a guidance counselor early on and make sure that they're aware that the student athlete wants to play college athletics, so that they can make sure they're sticking with the core classes required by the NCAA. It used to be unofficial visits. You could start doing them as a freshman or younger, but now that's not the case. I mean, you can still do them. It's just that you cannot meet with a member of the athletic department until after August 1st of heading into your junior year. So just something to keep in mind. This June 15th, before your junior year or after your sophomore year, you can start those communication with coaches, or that communication with coaches, phone, text, email. There's no longer the restrictions on the number of phone calls that can be made. Players can always reach out to a coach through text or email. It's just the coach can't respond until after June 15th. And, I think that's just, there used to be, and now it's been 4 years. So I think, everyone's kind of used to the new rule of you couldn't even, prior you could actually call the coach, and if you got the coach on the phone, they could talk. They can't do that now. And then this is when you start making sure they're taking their SAT prep classes so that they can take the SAT or ACT in the spring, and they can start taking official and unofficial visits. PSA can only make 5 official visits, and they can only make 1 official visit per school. So let's say they're deciding between maybe 2 sports, they're a 2-sport star, they can't take an official visit with the golf team and with the football team or something like that. I know that doesn't generally happen where someone's trying to play 2 sports in college, but sometimes there is the case where maybe a student athlete is thinking, do I want to play football or basketball or soccer or golf, and trying to figure out what sport they're going to do. And if that's the case, they can only make 1 official visit per school. Recruiting, as you become a senior, the contacts and communication needs to become more frequent, and we'll go into that a little bit later. Come mid-November, the date changes a little bit each year, but come mid-November is when the national letter of intents are signed. If you're going to a D3 school, or if you're not getting a scholarship, you can ask the coach to provide like a commitment letter, so you're actually signing something on signing day as part of the high school. This is when also definitely need to be registered with the eligibility center. I actually recommend student athletes doing that earlier, especially if you're going on an official visit. You need to have that number already established, your eligibility center account. And if you're going to play, you need to do this. If you're going to play an NCAA sport, you need to do it at some point. So I always recommend players doing it sometime before their junior year, just so that when they're communicating with coaches, it shows coaches that you're on top of things and already set. College applications, it's very important to know that regardless of what's going on with your NLI or your communication with the coach, you do still need to apply to the university. Those things are two separate entities, and you still need to apply even if you've signed a national letter of intent. D3, the recruiting is a little bit different because it can happen at any point during their high school career, and off-campus contact can begin after their sophomore year. But I think the most important thing to do is if a student athlete is really interested in a D3 school and is talking with the coach, the time that they can get the most assistance from the coach as far as admissions is if they want to apply early decision. So letting a coach know that early on, hey coach, you're my top choice. I want to attend this school. Can you help with my admissions? They're usually going to say yes, but it's going to be only if you're applying early decision. And official visit calendar is a little bit different, and I will say from a D2 and D3 perspective, they just don't happen as often because the budgets just aren't as great, and this is obviously coming out of their annual budget. So kind of touch on these two things twice here, but the kind of 3 steps for recruiting success is establishing what those target schools look like, the events and exposure, and then just the process itself. So I recommend that you start with a pretty big list of 40 to 60 schools with, 25% being your reach schools, and then you have your targets and safeties. And I think it's really important to make sure you're really selecting schools that are in line with where your academics and your athletics are, and most importantly, where your athletics are. Because honestly, from going to college just as a student, it's somewhat, I don't want to say easy. Well, it is easier to figure out, not to say that it's easy, but it's easier to figure out like, okay, I've got this GPA and these test scores and these extracurricular and volunteering hours and all this stuff. And like, if you're checking those boxes, you're more than likely going to get into that school. But when you add in the golf equation, just because you check all the boxes doesn't mean that there's a spot there for you. The coach could have some players that are slightly better than what they've gotten in the past. They may be limited into the number of players that they can bring in that year, or just in general, like their roster might be pretty small, and so that's all they've got. So that's why I say to start with a wide list and kind of whittle it down and see what sticks. It's a lot of extra work. I joke with my clients that they end up having several full-time jobs between being a student, being a golfer, and then doing the college recruiting process. But it is, part of the process. So from a scholarship standpoint, most schools honor the scholarship for 4 years, and you have the potential to increase your scholarship. So don't think just because it's somewhat of a low number as a freshman, you can't earn more money. But it's not football, basketball, where, everybody's on a full scholarship. There's, on the men's side, it's 4.5 scholarships for golf, and women's at 6. And if you're looking at a roster of 10 or 12 people, obviously the math doesn't add up as far as full scholarship. So there's a bunch of partials. Women's side, generally speaking, the rosters are a little bit smaller and the scholarship amounts are a little bit higher. But the thing that you have to consider and isn't always talked about is that not every team is what's called fully funded, meaning, if they offer at D2 men's golf 3.6 scholarships, that doesn't mean that every school has 3.6 scholarships. And in fact, not a lot of schools are fully funded. And there's even some conferences that I know of that have an agreement that they're not going to be fully funded for particular sports. So going in knowing that, I think, is important. And, any opportunity or any scholarship money is just awesome. And you can always pair it with academic money, so continuing to stress academics to your students is important. Kind of what we talked about just a minute ago. These are just the keys to success for the the entire recruiting process, and building that relationship, those relationships often, and being persistent is really important, as well as events and exposure and getting out there and playing. One thing I said when I was a college coach, and I say it all the time now too, is that if someone wants to play college golf, there is an opportunity out there for them. It's really just a matter of finding it. And the other thing is realizing that, you might not be carrying the bag of your dreams, and there might be a school that's smaller than you were hoping for. And so that's where it gets really important for the student athlete, the family, and their team to figure out what's the right thing. Because, maybe their golf opportunities don't match up with everything that they're looking for in their college experience. And I'll delve into some other options with that, or things to think about when it comes to that. But maybe they're looking for big time football, basketball games and Greek life, but their options are a smaller school, or they want to be where it's warm year round, and their options aren't going to provide that when it comes to golf. And so I think kind of adding all those things into that equation when making a decision are super important. So but regardless, when you get offered an opportunity to play college golf, it's a life-changing opportunity. I don't care what level it's on. This I've seen on social media every once in a while, and I think it's really important for student athletes to just remember, you're wanting to play college golf and having this amazing experience to possibly have some of your education paid for, and you also get to play golf every day and get to travel around the country and make great friends and develop great relationships with other players and coaches at schools across the country. And I can't stress it enough. Just like I can't stress it enough to be part of your community and be part of your high school golf team. It's a unique or great experience. And I hope everybody gets an opportunity to participate in something similar to that. But again, not getting so caught up in the D1, D2, D3, or whatever label, and just making sure you're going to a school that's a good fit. I mean, I know of D3 schools that can beat D1 schools, and same with D2, and you just have to find what school makes the most sense for your player, or they need to find out what makes the most sense for them, and hopefully you can help them remember certain things. So where to compete? Obviously there's the AJGA and a bunch of other big nationwide events are excellent for exposure. College coaches are going to more likely attend those events just because they're limited in the number of days and there's more depth at those tournaments. But I do think it's important too, especially with some of those bigger events that have qualifiers, that the qualifiers take place at some local or regional events. And you all know how great all these tours are that are in Texas. I mean, it's the depth and ability of the players in every tour is awesome. I know most of y'all work for some of these tours as well. And I think the biggest thing is to just get out and play as often as possible. I wish I could find it. I need to hunt a little bit harder, but there's a JC Deacon, the coach at Florida, is on a panel, and he just talks about just playing as often as you can, because if you're posting good scores, the college coaches are going to find you. And that's true. I mean, that's their job. They do a really good job of it. So I recommend families to play as often as they can, but also know that, hey, you have to consider your budget and the time, and getting into events is a challenge right now with the popularity of junior golf. But the biggest thing too is the budget, the cost, and mom or dad have got to travel, and so take time off from work. So I do think playing in local events where you can sleep in your own bed are awesome. Just trying to play in as many of those multi-round local events as you can. Playing in, 1 to 2 events a month if possible during the school year, and then 2 to 4 events during the summer. They're obviously very busy with their high school practice and tournaments during the school year, and just trying to sprinkle in some events is really important, because coaches, they're looking at that on Junior Golf Scoreboard, just seeing how often the player might want to play. I've had a few coaches say to me, like, I don't even know if that guy or girl's really interested in playing golf. They only played in 4 events over the last year, and so I think that's something that's very important, to try to play as often as you can, but again, keeping in mind what's going on in your life and world. There's a couple different things going on with camps nowadays. The elite camps, where you go to campus, it's a little bit a way for coaches to circumvent the unofficial visits or official visit restrictions, and where a player can get actual exposure to what it's like being with a coach and being on the campus. I think they're excellent opportunities. I do think it's important to make sure the school is how do I put this? It's within reason. Like, I think you can learn regardless, but just make sure you're going in knowing, hey, I'm going to this camp as a potential recruit, or I'm just going into this camp as an opportunity to learn a little bit more about college golf, and both are beneficial opportunities. I just think making sure that you understand kind of what your role is or why you're invited to be at that camp is important. And there's also summer camps where it's 3 or 4 nights on campus. Also an outstanding opportunity to get some exposure and time with the coaches. It's not as much a recruiting tool for college coaches. It can be. I know of coaches that I know of one school, they've got 3 former campers committed this year. So I do think it is an opportunity, but it's also just a really cool experience. You grab a buddy and go and spend some time away from home, learn a little bit of golf, and hang out with some college golfers. Ask them questions, what it's like to be in college, and what's like to play at the collegiate level. So I think sleepaway camps are awesome experiences, and should definitely be something to consider. From a resume, now that basically it's all digital, like, you don't have to really necessarily worry about the length. I do think it's important to include all of your multi-round events. I think keeping the name of the event, the date, the score, your place, and the field size is the most important data that coaches are going to want to see. They're probably going to go look at it in Junior Golf Scoreboard as well. So I do think whether you're cherry picking events or leaving out field size, like, the coach is going to go and check, so might as well just include that stuff. The last thing I think that's really important is when you're emailing coaches is to include obviously your name, your cell phone number, but a hyperlink to your resume, your swing video, and tournament schedule, so the coach has access to the most recent and up-to-date information. So with that, when I say hyperlink, I mean having your resume and your tournament schedule be in a Google Doc or a Google Sheet, so that as you update it, a coach is always able to access the most up-to-date information. If you have it as an attachment, maybe the coach doesn't get an email from you, or looks at an email from 3 months ago, and now all of a sudden, or from the player, now all of a sudden that information is very dated. And I think finding out, or keeping the coach, I should say, up to date on the schedule is really important, because maybe that coach will come out and watch you play. Swing video, it's pretty simple to do. It does not need to be super exciting. There doesn't need to be flying graphics, and definitely doesn't need to have music on it. What coaches want is just it to be pretty short. You could do a little introduction at the beginning, just saying the player can do an introduction, just saying, their name and their class and where they're from, and thank the coach for watching the video. But really, it doesn't need to be very long, as I've now said 3 or 4 times. Like just a few swings of the driver, face on and down the line, 7-iron wedge, some chips, putts, bunker shot maybe. But just to give the coach an idea of who the player is physically from a golf swing and setup standpoint, see their size and their speed. And that's what they're really just trying to get a little idea. I mean, I know coaches that don't look at these at all, and I know coaches that use them just as a tool to get started. And so, I think it's worth the extra time to make it, but you don't make it harder than it needs to be. You can do all of this on your computer and shoot it all on your phone. I do say to hold the phone horizontal instead of vertical, so that when you put it into YouTube, there's not a bunch of black on either side. Email, players have very short time to get a coach's attention. The coach might be, checking his or her email while on the course during qualifying, like in between groups. And so you really just got 15 to 30 seconds to try to grab the coach's attention. Stress to your players to do whatever they can to personalize the email. Maybe the bulk of the email is a copy and paste or a template, but just, adding a little bit here and there to personalize it can go a long way. How often email as freshman, sophomore? It doesn't have to be after every event by any means. It can be every couple of weeks or a couple months. The coaches can't reply other than thanks for the update. And even sometimes coaches won't even do that, just because it's a little bit of a gray area of what you can and can't say. Obviously, as you become a junior, it becomes a little bit more often, and then every 2 or 3 weeks, or maybe even more often after every event as a senior, if you still have not, if the player still is not signed with somebody or having an agreement to go somewhere. And it can happen. I know coaches or players ask the question, like, when is too late? And until you've exhausted all your options, I've had people commit as late as April and May of their senior year. So, there are opportunities out there. It's just, again, a matter of finding them. I want to go back to what I talked about earlier about kind of weighing what you want out of your experience and versus where your golf options are. And sometimes they don't match up. And there's an organization now run by Next Gen Golf. It's club golf. Years ago, I wouldn't have recommended it. But now the Shrixon and the PGA of America have pumped some money into this program, and it's a great way to get that big school feel or whatever maybe programs you're looking for, but still stay competitive. Most schools play 3 to 4 events per semester, but I do want to make sure, like, I'm not misleading anyone. Like, it is not the same thing as playing on a college team. It is student driven. There's no assigned practices. There's not a coach. It's just a group of students that get together to practice and play and then go compete. But again, they're very well run events, and worth looking into. Also, if you have a student athlete that's really committed to improving golf and wanting golf to be part of their life after college, there is the professional golf management program that's run at 17 universities around the country. Kind of some of the local ones listed here, or local to the regional ones listed here. But I think it's another way to consider participating in golf in college. And honestly, I know of some coaches that won't take PGM players, as that might sound a little interesting, but there's a lot of time that is involved with the PGM program, and especially in the summer with apprenticeships that you need to do that you don't get to play as often. And as you may know and hear from golf professionals, like they just don't play as often as you might think. So just something to think about or consider. But these are just a few things that I wanted to share with y'all as a group. I'll also include a PDF of this if you want to go over it with your players, or you have any other questions, or be able to access some of the links that I've sent. But I do thank you for your time. And again, I apologize. Trust me, I wish... Oh, let me move this here if I can. Oh, it won't let me move my camera there. It's Todd at recruiterelite.com. But again, I apologize for not being there a couple weeks ago, but I just felt, showing up with COVID was not a good thing to do, and considering that we would be in a confined indoor space. So I hope this helps. Please feel free to reach out, or have any of your players reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to help in any way I can. Love college golf, love junior golf, love high school golf. I'm going to attach a thing that I think sums up what I love about golf as well when I send this to Paige to forward on to you. But it's the greatest game there is, and want it to continue to grow and become popular. And I'm so thankful that y'all are here to help mold and teach and get more golfers out there in the world. So thank you for doing what you do, and thank you for taking the time to watch my video today. And good luck this year, and please, again, reach out if you've got any questions or if there's any way that I can help.